Yeah. Could I have commissioners and board members please come take their seats? All right, at this time, I'm going to open the meeting to comments from board members and commissioners. And if you would like to speak, please put your placard on its edge, and I will call on you.
I don't want to be the first one, but I'll be the second one. How's that? There we go.
Okay. Commissioner Kehoe.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delighted to be called on first. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Really, that last panel was excellent, and I know we're always under a time crunch at these meetings, and I certainly wanted to get over because I wanted lunch too, but it would have been nicer to hear a little more depth on those programs because there was such a variety. And it's such a huge geographic area. So, you know, food for thought, or maybe when we're doing a workshop at the CTC, we could look at some of those issues in a little deeper way. Thank you.
Supervisor?
First, gotta get it close. Can you hear me? Okay. First, I want to express appreciation to everyone who spoke on all the panels. I think this was really informative, educational. I'm looking forward to HCD sitting up here with us because it is important having housing at the next meeting. And I mean, my observation is someone who wears three hats: a board hat, a regional hat with the Bay Area Quality Management District, and then a local government hat. I mean, really, action is needed at all three levels, and that's what's so complicated and complex about this. And one level of government's not going to, just like one agency, is not going to solve the transportation, climate change, and housing issue. It's going to take effort at all three levels. And I do think it's going to take some strong leadership at the state level, you know, that has unique differences for different parts of the state, because the state is different, has regions that approach things differently, so we have to consider that. But I do think stronger state leadership will be helpful for both the regional and local levels. And I realize there's always tension when the state provides greater direction to regional or local government. But so we need to be conscious about how we do this in a way that maximizes the chances of success. And oftentimes with incentive dollars, I think, you know, you either have the carrot or the stick, and I think you probably need a little both, some carrot and some stick. And finding that right balance is going to be the key to success: how much carrot and how much stick. And I do think changing our cultures of our different agencies are very different. And so, as several speakers mentioned, the importance of really integration of our cultures. And a greater message that we have that builds greater public support. The public doesn't really care as much about which agency is solving their problem or which level of government is solving their problem. They just want problems solved. And so I think we need to think about how we frame all of this in ways that appeal broadly. And health is a major component. You know, shorter commutes, more time with your family, you know, more affordable housing, better health. How we figure this out in a roadmap. So it's a start. Obviously, there was not a conclusion to things today, but I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion and action.
Senator Monning.
Yes, thank you, and I want to thank the City of Modesto for hosting us and the Transportation Commission for including us. I think this is a valuable coming together of the board and the commission. This last panel representing the Central Valley communities, I would have also enjoyed the chance to exchange a little more with them, and I know we ran out of time, but it was raised earlier by Tamika Butler, the question of race as one of the determinants of challenges, whether it's affordable housing or access to jobs. My district, the 17th Senate District, it's Central Coast, and our leading employer is agriculture. Our second is hospitality tourism, and our third is higher education. The first two are driven by immigrant workforce, many of whom can't afford housing at minimum wage jobs. And the farm workers, by definition, are traveling huge distances, often in their own cars, sometimes in farm labor contractor buses. And just a question to put out there, not for anyone to answer now, the panel is gone, but the van pools seem to be serving prison employees, other government agencies, or large employers. But whether there's any thought or work going into, for farm labor contractors, converting fuel-burning buses to electric generation buses in the future, the housing issue of getting all workforce closer. When I come over the Pacheco Pass on Monday mornings, coming from west to east, from the Salinas Valley over to the Central Valley, the westbound traffic at 7 a.m., it's gridlock coming over Pacheco Pass. And it's people who have bought homes or live in Santanella, Los Banos, Patterson, and they're making that commute every day over the hill, and they're sitting in gridlock, idling next to big 18-wheelers, because the road doesn't have the capacity to handle the number of vehicles that are dependent on it. That's an example where high-speed rail, if that link is ever built between Gilroy and the Central Valley, a lot of that workforce would be going through tunnels through the Pacheco Pass, working on their laptops or catching up on their sleep instead of sitting in idling traffic. So these issues are tough. They're multifactorial. But when you look at the composition of our workforce, particularly in agriculture, which is the leading industry and employer in the Central Valley as well in this valley, we have to factor in the housing and the transportation component directly as it affects the farm worker community, the dairy community, et cetera. And I know there's attention to that. I would have liked to have, or as we move forward, I will look forward to learning more about some of the initiatives or efforts that are addressing that critical component of our local economies. So thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move to the public comment period. I don't have a, I don't. That's okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see your tag up. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. And yes, thanks to the panel for great information, to staff for putting today together. I hope we will have more discussion, not necessarily today, but in the future, thinking about how we can move more from information to collective action. You know, including the housing department with this really helps. The goal is to focus how to align transit, housing, to support climate goals. And that's really our mandate. I think we have a good example of action that's arisen from our working together in terms of our response to the federal administration efforts to really limit California's authority to implement agreed on mileage standards, greenhouse gas reduction work. So clearly there's a good precedent. The information has been wonderful, and I look forward to our thinking deeper about how to use that collectively to move forward on these issues.
Senator, do you have something else? You
Oh,
wanna
I'm
say?
sorry.
Oh, okay.
Just didn't
Sorry about that.
put it down. Thank you.
Okay. All right, now we will move to public comment period. I would ask that as you make your public comments, you limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, depending on the number. And if we have a whole bunch more speaker cards come up, I might have to dial that back a little bit. If you have, a lot of you are saying the same things, I would ask that you choose a single spokesperson to relay your collective thoughts so that we can make sure that everybody gets heard. All righty, so we're going to start with Chanel. I want to say Fletcher, but that's not right. Chanel Fletcher, okay, followed by Esther Rivera. So Chanel, if you would come to the podium, and then Esther, if you'd get right behind her. Okay, if Chanel's not here, I'll go to Esther. Where'd Esther go? She's always Johnny on the spot. Okay, we will go to Will Barrett, followed by Bill McGovern. Yeah, we'll come back around to those who weren't here. If they're still hanging out, we'll come back to them. So Will Barrett, followed by Bill McGovern.
Thank you very much. I am Will Barrett with the American Lung Association, and I know that several of my colleagues in the Climate Plan Coalition are here, and they will be coming along to make their comments. So Chanel and Esther and Bill as well. So first off, I want to say thank you for the conversation today. I think there were a lot of great ideas raised, a lot of good spirit of cooperation and coordination that we know is needed. All of our state agencies rowing in the same direction to make sure our challenges are met. We can't operate in silos, and I think the executive order, for example, really kind of helps to tie together the ideas of increasing public health benefits, reducing harmful pollutants, and really making sure that as our state grows, that it's growing in a healthier way. One of the things that in the executive order we took most note about was the tying of VMT to public health benefits and public health improvement. We know that'll come in the form of alternatives to driving, so reduction in transportation pollution that drives California to the top of the list for most polluted in the United States, has the significant impact on our climate challenges that are actually making the job of cleaning up our air that much more difficult. Our State of the Air report that we release every year showed widespread increases in ozone pollution due to extreme heat burdens and widespread particle pollution due to the wildfires. So we know that the challenge that we're all facing is transportation pollution. We know that we need to convert as much as possible to zero-emission technologies for the passenger fleet, transit buses, school buses, the freight sector, but we also know that the VMT element of this equation really has to be at the forefront. So within the executive order, we really do see that as a critical piece, that focus on public health, improving public health through VMT reduction will help with chronic diseases, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, asthma rates. All of those are impacted by our dependence on the automobile. And so everything we can do to align state funding and state agency missions with pollution reduction is only going to help all of us get healthier communities that we're all working for. It was helpful to hear, as usual, from our friends in the Valley, the COGS, who are doing innovative things and want to see more of that. We want those innovative projects to really become the norm and not kind of a special panel that they're focused on. And we want to help them. We've been working with them a lot over the last few years, trying to identify funding opportunities to help boost those things through grant programs, and really feel like we can really make a difference as we elevate those great projects and make sure that those become the norm going forward. Finally, on the SAFE rule, the American Lung Association has been a very outspoken critic of the administration's policy to revoke California's waiver. We think it's far, far out of line with the history of the Clean Air Act that has saved so many lives and improved so much health in so many communities in California and beyond. There are about 90 health organizations across the country, excuse me, health organizations across the country, about 90 of them, who have banded together voicing our opposition to that, and we'll continue to fight with you all to preserve California's authority under the Clean Air Act, save lives, and improve our air. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill McGovern, and then if Julia Jordan could be right behind. Okay, Julia Jordan. And then if I saw Esther come in. So Esther, if you could be right after Julia, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Julia Jordan with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, and I'll try to be brief. I just mainly want to echo the comments my colleague at ALA just made about supporting the executive order, and especially really urging you to take this opportunity as an opening to really work together and advance something bold, and to do it in a way that addresses, as Dr. Balmes and Commissioner Butler and others mentioned, environmental justice and equity as really a central component of that planning, land use, and decisions about where transportation investments go. And I think part of that means really ensuring that there's equitable funding in historically disadvantaged communities. And that includes low-income rural areas, including those in the San Joaquin Valley that we heard about today, but specifically residents, excuse me, in some of these areas, like unincorporated areas of the state. And I also want to just echo the comments about that some of the innovative transit and flexible transit we heard about is also really promising, and it would be valuable to see that become more of the norm and something that's invested in from a variety of funding sources, and really as a long-term kind of way of addressing and rethinking public transit. It's also important for us to consider listening to the direct input of marginalized communities and rural low-income communities. And that means really having robust public participation and planning processes at the local and regional level, including in RTPs and other planning processes, so that those communities who are interested in things like zero emissions, car share, van pool, can really be part of designing what works for them in their community. For communities for whom preservation of affordable housing is really critical. We heard a little bit about that today, but I think that needs to be lifted up as well in this conversation. And those who are really living with the threat of eviction, and in places where a really basic lack of infrastructure can be kind of the difference between whether or not you're able to take a job, how you even get around your own neighborhood in cases where maybe there's not a sidewalk, for example. Just smart investment, smart planning, in addition to some of the electric vehicle technologies and things like that, is critical. And I'm really looking forward to a strong implementation and meaningful actions from these agencies to address climate, transportation, housing, and land use with a racial justice and equity lens. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Esther? Chair Nichols, do you know why Esther is awesome? She's from Modesto. Did you know that?
Oh, no.
That makes her awesome.
I am from Modesto.
I'm a good straight
Do you need a
woman.
second on that motion?
Ever want to ask me
Vice Chair?
questions like that?
Thank you so much. Esther Rivera, Deputy Director for California Walks. Happy to be here with you all today. I'm really encouraged by today's discussion. Just want to highlight a few things, and I'll keep it brief. Today there was discussion on topics that haven't really been breached in this, in these spaces: homelessness, racism, things that we really need to be discussing as we're talking about advancing our transportation and as we're talking about addressing the goals that we have as a state. I think something to really consider as we're trying to align the executive order with our transportation spending and our climate goals is also to keep in mind that what really comes to mind with that is safety. If we're making our roads safer for not only people who are driving, but people who are walking and biking, we're going to get to that, and we're going to make it easier for people to make those choices. So as we're aligning our spending, always keeping in mind the safety component for people who live in these communities. I think not just today, but over the past 2 days, I've been really encouraged with the conversation that's happened in the spaces, at the listening session that was held on Tuesday, at yesterday's commission meeting, today at the joint meeting, and I'm so happy it happened in Modesto. So that puts us on the map. So I really appreciate the conversation. I really look forward to more of this happening in these spaces and continuing. And I'm really excited, again, just to echo the new commissioners, and excited to see where these conversations will go. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Kevin Hamilton? And if Elaine Gorman can be right behind Kevin?
Bill McGavern's back in the room as well. Good afternoon, members of the commission, the board. Thank you for your time today and for continuing this great effort that's so necessary to the health and well-being of our state, coordinating transportation and air pollution. Speaking for the San Joaquin Valley as a region, which is where I focus, I have to say that I am frustrated and continue to be by the failure of my valley and the counties in my valley to work more actively together in transportation planning and coordinating that planning. We see other communities, other areas of the state where multi-county entities are able to connect their residents to work, to places to live in a fairly effective fashion, draw down incredible amounts of money from the federal and state government because of that collaboration. There was a ray of sunshine today in the discussion about the long-term collaboration on Highways 99 and I-5. I think about Highway 33 and 132 and, the other state routes that run the length of the valley carry a lot of truck traffic, Most of that truck traffic is local. It's moving back and forth from farm to city to distribution centers with product and supplies and waste. And so these are running through our communities everywhere. Yet that road could be in one county, a really beautiful wide road, in some places 2 lanes on each side, and step into another county and it becomes a smaller, narrower 2-lane road because it's not considered as important or as worth investment there. We're still undergoing those same kinds of situations in the valley. Air pollution is still hit and miss. We've got a SIP coming now from, not to let you guys off the hook there, Richard and company and Mary, but that has been committed to, but because of the governor's budget and other unintended consequences, there won't be money to make sure that SIP is actually able to be carried out. So, we have a lot of concerns, and our region needs this coordinated, effective way of planning these 2 critical pieces and connecting them to our housing. I heard somebody say earlier that people are moving businesses out of the state. I'm sure they are. But just as many are coming in, at least that's been my experience. I work in the healthcare sector, and because we've got so many healthcare problems, we've got plenty of people coming here to work, I'll tell you right now. And they're coming to the valley as well because of the price of housing. They are commuting. My daughter, who lives here in Modesto with her family, and her husband both commute 2 days a week to the Bay Area. It is 2 of the most miserable days of their lives. We don't have the mass transit here to take care of that because, again, it's just not coordinated, and we're kind of waiting for an Uber agency that runs the ACE train to get it down here, when in reality, we should be working together as an 8-county group to be able to bring that asset to bear very quickly and move it forward, not just to Merced, but all the way down the valley. We all believe, or many of us do, in the dream of high-speed rail, but we recognize we probably won't see that for another 10 or 15 years either. Meanwhile, everybody's still got to get to work. And I want to tell you right now, we've got tons of communities in the lower counties of the valley who are completely isolated from the economy. They are stuck in unincorporated communities 50 miles from the nearest employment hub unless they work in farm work. So the horizons for those young people there are also limited. And again, it's because we haven't been able to coordinate all these efforts together. We're doing some nice pilots, but I don't see any sign of how those pilots would be replicated in other communities.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Hamilton.
I would just ask you to do better.
Thank you. Thank you.
As Jeff Jeffers says, we can always be better.
Okay. Elaine Gorman, then Ryan Kinney. If Ryan Kinney, if you could kind of be on deck, so. And then it'll be Sean Edgar, if Sean could be ready to go as well.
Hi there. My name
Hi.
is Elaine Gorman, and I really appreciate you guys coming down here because I had a 7-mile drive. It was great. I doubt if I would have driven up to Sacramento, so I appreciate your effort in being here. And I'm sure that you guys noticed the air quality as you were driving down either today or yesterday. And those of us who live in the valley full-time, the air quality has been terrible for lots of reasons. But I'm having a little bit breathing difficulties right now. Anyway, I have lived and worked in Modesto for about 30 years, and I'm a retired science teacher. I'm also an active member of the local Yokuts group of the Sierra Club. The California Air Resources Board has failed to control vehicle emissions in the San Joaquin Valley. Poor air quality is responsible for thousands of deaths and illnesses such as asthma and other respiratory ailments. CARB has also failed to impel the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District to improve air quality to meet standards of the Clean Air Act. Our state needs vehicle regulations that will provide healthier air for all Californians. Low-emission and zero-emission vehicle standards and clean vehicle incentive programs such as charging infrastructure can help to meet clean air goals. California needs additional strategies to reduce driving such as smart growth and improved public transit. California needs a plan to show how cars and light-duty trucks can hit climate-stabilizing targets. With the likelihood of increasing fire activity and accompanying smoke and other pollutants combined with San Joaquin Valley's agricultural dust and vehicle emissions, we are living with the toxic air quality situation here. CARB and CTC must do all that is possible to ensure that San Joaquin Valley residents have the cleanest and healthiest possible air quality. I know it's going to be a difficult task. We're relying on you guys to help lead the way, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gorman. Okay, Ryan Kinney, followed by Sean Edgar.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ryan Kenny with Clean Energy. We're the nation's largest provider of renewable natural gas transportation fuel. And this has been obviously a very productive discussion today, and having both the board and the commission in one place talking about a variety of issues. But I did want to just have a broader discussion and focus on the heavy-duty sector. And we're hearing from other stakeholders today about the impacts of heavy-duty trucks on our road and the need to get rid of diesel. We all saw on the way over here, whether you're local or out of town, the multitude of heavy-duty trucks on the road on the 99, and we talked about the 5 as well. The leading source of NOx emissions are the heavy-duty and medium-duty sectors. They're only 2% of the vehicle population, but they are the largest source of NOx. And, you know, the remedy that our industry really is trying to move forward is the implementation of low NOx heavy-duty trucks on our highways to displace diesel. And they are at a 0.02 NOx optional standard. They're 90% certified cleaner than diesel, and they're 99% in-use cleaner from in-use testing. So as we look at a longer-term solution focused on zero emission, I think most of us, including our industry, does support zero emission technologies. But we do see the gap in the near term for both greenhouse gas emission reductions and NOx. And we'd like to see more policy emphasis on low NOx trucks to remove diesel on the road. Secretary Kim mentioned last week he had some comments which aligned both the climate goals and transportation spending. And he did mention the reinforced commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector, citing both AB 32 and SB 32. And he also mentioned that they want an approach considering the economy, jobs, and income equality. And I think, you know, the goals of ARB and the commission align with what he was looking to promote. Just finally, I'll also mention too, you may have seen this week, Next 10, the organization, released their annual California Green Innovative Index. And it mentioned that California will reach climate targets more than 100 years too late if current pace of emissions reductions holds. And they go on to say it will happen without major policy and technology breakthroughs to dramatically accelerate emissions decline. So again, we do believe low NOx trucks are a solution, and we would appreciate both the Commission and ARB their further consideration to get more trucks on the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kinney.
Excuse me, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes?
I just wanted to make mention of the fact that Mr. McGavern is back in the audience, and you'd called his name earlier.
Yeah, he's going to come back around. So thank you. I appreciate that. Sean Edgar, then Linda Kamushian.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and board members. I'm Sean Edgar. I'm the Director of Clean Fleets based in Sacramento. Here today on behalf of the Valley operated sanitation companies. You talked about sustainable communities, and more sustainable housing means more customers that need sustainable and integrated waste management services. So at a high level, I just wanted to touch on the fact that may be little known to some in the audience. There are over 50 family-operated entities here in the San Joaquin Valley, from San Joaquin County down through Kern County, that operate integrated solid waste management services. It's a diverse group of owners in these family-operated companies. Many of them come from immigrant backgrounds, and they have a diverse workforce, and they have a diverse facility, and they operate diverse types of equipment. And with all of that diversity, there's one thing in common. These folks have made a sustainable business out of protecting the environment, and that's a unique value proposition that the waste industry has to offer. So I'll just touch in a few minutes on a couple high-level views. I think, barring from Mr. Corey's conversation, to paraphrase, we all work better when we work together. So sustainability and integrated are two things that are key to the folks that I have the privilege to work with. And whether it's here in the Valley or from Humboldt all the way down to San Diego, very common issues in the waste industry. First of all, the challenges of clean trucks. We have one of our elderly members who's still active in the waste hauling community, and he's down there in Kern County. He has a expression that I like, and he says, when there's a disturbance and you resist, you become the disturbance. The waste industry 20 years ago had a huge challenge from ARB to implement a clean vehicle program. So what did we do? We implemented a clean vehicle program. We figured out how to operate some of the cleanest trucks on the road today. We do so with the understanding that your customer, you're our customer, and you're going to need more containers because multiple masters, not just air quality, water quality, and other pollution prevention programs. So Senate Bill 1383 requires us to manage organics better. So many of you will be putting your food in your green waste barrel. If you don't have a green waste barrel, you may be getting an extra barrel to put your food waste in there. I bring that up just to say that we have mandates to protect the public from pollution as our first line of defense, reduce all the other components of waste, the construction demolition debris when you go out and build sustainable communities. Even if it's a green building, it's still going to have some waste and recycling component. So the bottom line is integrated policy works the best. And I would just add that for today's discussion, you have willing partners in the waste industry. You have folks that I've referred to in front of ARB as the A team. And these are folks that literally went into a bank to build a business plan, to buy the fleet, to buy the facilities, to pay their workers well, to be able to deliver services every day of the week. We hope to continue that dialogue, and I'm sure for another day we can talk about electric vehicles and the fact that my University of California, Berkeley alma mater shut down today because they don't have electricity. So there are a lot of other things for another day we can talk about, but for today, we're your willing partners. Thank you for the process.
Thank you. Linda, and then Chanel Fletcher, and then Bill McGovern.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Kamushi, and I'm with the California Bicycle Coalition. We are a statewide advocacy group. We advocate for equitable, inclusive, and prosperous communities where bicycling helps all Californians lead healthy and joyful lives. So I want to emphasize here that we work at the intersection of so many important issues that have been discussed here today. And so I'm encouraged by the conversation, and as a planner, someone who's been studying this work and asking why are we not doing more, this is the type of space where I see and the leadership here today and the thoughtful conversation. And so I encourage more and more people to tune in, but beyond that to see how far we've come from just last year, from the first engagement here. But even beyond that, why we're even here together is that because there is political will. There are communities who've been working at this intersection for a long time, advocates at the local level who've been working at this a long time, because these have in a lot of ways become intractable situations and issues. It's reached crisis not because of an overnight challenge. These are policy decisions that have been made over time that we need to tackle together. And so the political will does come from the local communities and listening to them, and we appreciate the forums that have been broadened to do that at the CTC and at the Air Resources Board. But what I would say is that it also takes decision makers and at your level to listen and to make informed decisions and to understand that you can't always do things at the agency level or the department level because they've become systems that have become calcified at times in certain situations because beyond what they can do. And so legislation has helped to form this forum. It's helped to inform bringing in more diverse voices as commissioners. Legislation is a very key point to see where the political will is and what communities want, because as many of you who are legislators know, it's not easy to get legislation in place, but it becomes necessary when there is no other option. For example, expanding incentives to electric bikes has been an effort we've pushed forward because it was not easy to do necessarily through the agency level. So we've had to go legislative route, but it's definitely becoming more embraced and as a way that's expanding options to more people to be able to use biking as a method to get around in their communities. But the other is that we have to look at making it safe, as my colleague Esther did mention, safe and accessible for people to do this. We have to look at places where we need to put in the resources for people to walk their children safely to school in the mornings. And beyond the air quality benefits to our health, there's so many more public health indicators of bringing those resources to the community. So I would encourage us to also look at beyond the health impacts beyond air quality as well. Thank you.
Thank you. You said calcified. The older I get, the more calcified I feel. Ugh, stiff and sore. Okay, Chanel, and then Bill.
I'm not feeling calcified. I do want to apologize for missing my original time. I am exclusively breastfeeding a 9-month-old, so I did have to pump. So sorry about that, you guys. You guys are very important, but he's important too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let my clock start now, please.
More important.
Thank you, right? He's super adorable. Love him a lot. Okay, so my clock is officially starting now, hopefully. So my name is Chanel Fletcher. I am the Executive Director of Climate Plan. We work on policies and strategies to advance sustainable, equitable communities. There was a lot discussed today. I'm going to try to condense this into 3 things. One is that the SAFE rule is something that we are very, very interested in. So CalSTA, as you are leading that process, please, please, please loop us in. We would love to kind of be a part of that and really thinking about how we as advocates can continue to support the work that you're doing, and also I think with our MPO partners. In terms of the comments that Commissioner Butler made, where she's no longer here, around equity and race, I think I wanted to say that we are very supportive of calling that out. And so when we're looking at planning and housing, I mean, it's entrenched. So I think we're talking about redlining, we're talking about segregation, we're talking about racial covenants. And even though all of those things are illegal now, that's what our communities were shaped by, what they were built upon. And so when we're talking about, infill and density and housing, we really do also need tools to start thinking about how do we address the fact that many of the communities that we're talking about, or predominantly communities of color that you want to densify, how do we think about displacement and protections and making sure that we're not pushing out or leaving out communities of color. So that is something that we are very supportive of, and I know HTD is no longer here, but I think we would love to also work on that process with them as well. The final point that I wanted to talk about was the executive order. It was a great kind of hearing that presentation. We are super supportive of it, and I believe that it will be really helpful in terms of as we go forward. I think one of the things that I thought I heard Supervisor Joya mention was that it could be helpful to have some kind of clear deliverables for this group to work towards. And I just wanted to say, I think that's a great idea. I think that when we're talking about aligning transportation funding with our climate goals, this venue actually feels like a really great place to do that, because we have CARB here, we have CTC, one's working on climate, one's working on transportation. There's a clear nexus between that. And so one of the things that I'd be really interested in, I think, thinking through and potentially hearing more thoughts about is it possible as implementation happens with executive order to really kind of give some clear deliverables or just guidance for this group to think about, like, what does that look like in these meetings? How can we start to kind of think a little bit more about the action and the outcomes and what we want to see around that? So happy to follow that up with anybody. I'm not sure if it's the CTC or ARB or even CalSTA, but I do think that starting to get more and more towards action and thinking about what we can do together as a joint entity would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chanel, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Babies are awesome.
Oh my God, he is. Okay, Bill, go.
Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill McGavin with the Coalition for Clean Air, and thank you for the second chance. My excuse is not nearly as good as Chanel's. I was having lunch with some agency employees. That was my mistake. So we're not on track to meet our 2030 standard for greenhouse gas emissions, which is in law according to the Next 10 report. We're also, unfortunately, not on track to deliver healthy air to the residents of the San Joaquin Valley or the South Coast region. And the consequences, if we do miss that mark, include a possible loss of transportation dollars, as you heard this morning. The consequences would certainly include elevated levels of illness and premature death from that air pollution. In fact, there are far more people who die from traffic-related air pollution than from traffic accidents, and both of those death tolls are unacceptably high. We also know that the people who suffer from the health impacts of this pollution are disproportionately in communities of color. And of course, the biggest cause of both of our emission problems, those related to climate and to air quality, is transportation. It causes over 80% of our air pollution and roughly 50% of our greenhouse gas pollution when you include the upstream impacts. So to solve these problems, I think we all agree that we need to better align transportation, land use, air, and climate policies. And that's why we so welcome the governor's executive order and thank Governor Newsom and Director Gordon for that. It starts to put us on the right path to aligning those policies, though obviously a lot of the hard work is ahead in making that happen. So as you look forward to your work together, one area that I would suggest that you focus on is sustainable freight, because you already have the plan. The agencies worked together on it 3-4 years ago, and a lot of that sustainable freight action plan still needs to be implemented. So I would strongly recommend that both the Commission and the Board and the other relevant agencies who were part of that reconvene with a strong focus on sustainable freight, carrying out everything that was in that plan and also updating it to meet our future challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Doug, do we have any more speaker cards? We do not. Thank you. So we heard some very insightful presentations today. I want to especially thank the San Joaquin Valley 8 counties, 7 of which who were on the panel today, and Vito Chiesa. I want to thank them especially because their time, given that our previous panels went over, their time was truncated, and I know that there was a lot more detail that they wanted to go in. So my apologies to them for not letting them get more time. If you look at that trifold pamphlet, if I could steal yours for a second, they have lots of things they wanted to talk about of what they're doing on the back and inside. So again, to the San Joaquin Valley Coalition, I apologize for that we didn't get to hear all of it, but it was exciting to hear. Chair Nichols, do you have any final words?
Yes, I was going to hold up this brochure
okay.
myself, so I'll do it again. I think this is an amazingly packed piece of paper here. It's got a lot of really interesting data and charts. I noticed that you asked a question one time about the source of some of the data and a question whether it was tied to other things that were here. It raises questions, let's put it that way. It raises more good questions, but it's also full of some really interesting and useful information. So I have a request, which is I would like another copy of it, because even though I passed my eye exam with my current glasses, this is in really small print, really tiny print. So it would be really nice if there was a version of it that could be done that was just a little bit larger. Maybe it could be a couple pages or something like that.
We get the blown up version of it.
Yeah. But
Okay.
but the stuff that's in it is very interesting and useful information. So thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. So we will continue this dialogue between CARB and CTC and HCD, which will join us officially on January 1st, 2020. The 2 dates that are currently scheduled for our meetings in 2020 are April 29th in Sacramento and November 4th in Los Angeles. I want to thank everyone for attending in person and everyone who is listening to on the webcast, especially Fran Inman. Hope Ron's doing great. And this meeting is adjourned.